Have you ever thought you were just going on a normal hike with your friends, but it turned into the scariest day of your life? Well, that's precisely what happened to me and my friends when we decided to hit the trails of the Adirondacks one winter morning. My name's Marcus, by the way. I've always been into hiking and outdoorsy stuff, even more so since I've had some rough times recently. Getting out into nature seemed like a good way to clear my head. So there we were, all bundled up and excited, standing at the base of this mountain that wasn't really popular with tourists. The air was freezing and crisp, and everything was quiet except for the crunch of snow under our boots. It felt good to laugh and joke with my buddies as we checked our gear and made sure we had everything for the climb. "Hey Marcus, you sure this is the right path? It looks barely touched," my friend Sam asked, half joking, half serious as he squinted at the barely visible trail ahead. I just laughed and slapped him on the back. "That's the whole thrill of it, man. It's an adventure. We'll be fine." And off we went, stepping into what was supposed to be a fun challenge. Little did I know, it was going to be a lot more than we bargained for. The hike started off great, but then things, well, they took a turn I never saw coming. The hike started off great, and we were all upbeat, laughing and pushing each other to keep up the pace. The trail was harder than we thought, but that only made it more exciting. As we climbed higher, the trees seemed to close in around us, and the path became even less clear. That's when we stumbled on the first strange thing, a message scratched into the bark of a tree that read "Turn back now." "Whoa, check this out," Jamie called us over, pointing at the message with a mix of amusement and confusion on her face. "You think someone's just messing with us?" I tried to laugh it off. "Probably just some other hikers having a bit of fun. Let's keep going." But as we moved on, the messages didn't stop. They appeared every so often along the path, growing increasingly urgent. "Not safe, rid another, and leave while you can." The words sent a chill down my spine, but curiosity nudged us forward more than fear held us back. "Someone's really dedicated to this prank," Sam muttered under his breath. But I could tell he was uneasy. The jokes had stopped, and everyone was a bit quieter, listening to the silence that seemed too thick, too heavy for just before noon. Then the trail markers we'd been following vanished, and for a moment we thought we were lost. I remember looking around, the bare branches forming gnarled shadows on the snow, and feeling watched, like eyes were on us from somewhere unseen. "Guys, maybe we should turn back. I've got a bad feeling about this," Emily whispered, her voice barely above the wind that had started to pick up. But I shook my head, too stubborn to admit that perhaps we should have heeded the warnings. "It's just a little further to the summit. Let's not head back now. We're adventurers, remember?" Reluctantly, they agreed, and we pressed on, not knowing that with every step we were walking deeper into a nightmare that was waiting just for us. The sky seemed to grow darker by the minute, as if it too thought we should turn back. The further we went, the more the mood shifted from adventurous to tense. The sky above was now a blanket of heavy gray clouds, casting shadows that made the afternoon feel more like twilight. It was around then that we started noticing other weird things, not just the messages. Our backpacks seemed lighter, and when we checked, we realized some of our food was missing. "Okay, this isn't funny anymore. Who's taking the food?" Emily's voice cracked a bit, her usual calm demeanor slipping into worry. "It's not us, Em. Someone else is out here," Sam replied, his eyes scanning the dense trees around us. He tried to sound confident, but his voice was edged with fear. I could see Jamie clutching her arms, looking around nervously. What if it's whoever's leaving those creepy messages? What if they're watching us right now? That thought had crossed my mind too, but I pushed it aside. "Let's just keep moving. We can share what food we have left. It'll be enough." As we continued, the camaraderie we had at the start was fraying, replaced by suspicions and accusations. Every snap twig or rustle in the underbrush had us jumping. We were no longer speaking in jest. Instead, every conversation was a whispered debate about whether to turn back. "I say we go back. This is messed up," Jamie hissed, pulling her jacket tighter around her. "And let whoever is messing with us win." "No way," I argued, more out of stubbornness than logic. It wasn't just the situation that was getting to us. It was the fear of the unknown, the fear of being hunted. That fear started to eat away at the trust we had in each other. Every misplaced item, every strange noise made us eye one another with suspicion. Were we just scaring ourselves, or was there really something sinister waiting for us out here? It was then that we found a clearing with a circle of stones in the center. Inside, charred remains of what looked like a campfire, and more ominously, a series of small bizarre totems made of twigs and string hanging from the branches. It looked like someone had been living here, and not too long ago. Guys, maybe Marcus is right. If we just reach the summit, we can head straight down the other side and get out of here faster, Sam suggested, trying to mediate the growing tension. Reluctantly, everyone agreed, but the unease was palpable. Each step felt heavier, each glance carried doubts, and our once strong friendship seemed as fragile as the brittle branches snapping under our feet. As we left the eerie clearing, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were making a grave mistake. By the time we reached the summit, the sky had darkened into an early evening gloom, making it feel much later than it was. The wind howled around us, carrying whispers that seemed to echo the warnings we'd ignored. The peak offered a stunning view, but none of us could enjoy it. Our nerves were too frayed, our minds too focused on the strange events of the day. "Look, there's a cave over there," Emily pointed out, her voice barely audible over the wind. "Should we check it out? Might give us a clue about who's been doing this." I hesitated, my instincts screaming that it was a bad idea, but the part of me that needed answers pushed us forward. "Okay, let's just take a brief look. We're here anyway, might as well." As we approached the cave, the wind seemed to die down, as if the mountain itself was holding its breath. Inside, it was surprisingly warm and eerily quiet. The walls were lined with old camping gear and maps pinned up with notes scrawled all over them. It was clear someone had been living here, and recently. Sam picked up one of the maps, studying it. "Guys, these notes. They mention watching hikers, tracking movements." That's when we heard it. Footsteps outside, crunching on the snow, deliberate and slow. We froze, barely breathing, each of us exchanging terrified glances. "Who's there?" Jamie's voice broke the silence, louder than she intended. There was no answer, just the sound of the footsteps circling around the cave's entrance. Then, all at once, the figure appeared at the entrance, a wild, disheveled man, his eyes wide with a mix of fury and madness. He blocked the only exit, a makeshift weapon in hand. "We just wanted to see the summit," I stammered, my voice shaky, trying to reason with him. "We'll leave. We won't come back." He didn't respond with words, just a guttural yell as he lunged toward us. The next few moments were a blur of shouts and scrambling as we tried to defend ourselves and find a way out. Emily slipped past him, screaming for us to follow. We managed to escape the cave, the man's angry shouts echoing behind us as we ran without looking back. Once we were a safe distance away, we collapsed, panting and shaken, beneath an old pine that offered little shelter from the wind, but felt like a fortress compared to where we'd just been. "We need to get off this mountain," Sam said, his voice firm but shaking. "Now." We nodded, too scared to argue, too shaken to speak. As we made our way down the other side of the mountain, the wind seemed to carry our fears with it, whispering warnings we now wished we had heeded sooner. The descent was steep and treacherous, but the real danger felt like it was always just a step behind us, hidden in the shadows just beyond our sight. As we hurried down the mountain, the terrain underfoot became slippery and treacherous, forcing us to slow our frantic pace. The forest felt alive with noises that could have been just the wind or, as our frazzled nerves suggested, our pursuer continuing his chase. Every shadow seemed to move. Every rustle of leaves was him stalking us. "Did you see his face? He looked like he's been out here for years," Emily whispered, glancing back over her shoulder. "Yeah, and those notes, the maps. He's been watching hikers, maybe planning this," Jamie added, her voice quivering. "I can't believe this is happening," I said, trying to keep my voice steady for the sake of the group. "We need to stay sharp. Keep an eye out for any shortcuts or ranger stations on the maps." As we navigated the treacherous descent, we stumbled upon a small, weathered shack partially hidden by overgrown bushes. "Should we check it out?" Sam suggested. Might be a place to hide or find help. We approached cautiously, the shack offering a brief respite from our exposed trek. Inside, we found more confusing clues: a radio, long since dead, some old food supplies, and a jacket that looked remarkably like one that belonged to a hiker who had gone missing last season. This doesn't make sense. Was he using this place too? Emily pondered out loud, her fingers tracing over the dusty items. Or maybe it's just a regular old hiker's shack, and we're reading too much into it, Sam countered, but his eyes told a different story. He was as unsure as the rest of us. Suddenly, a loud crack sounded from the woods nearby. We froze, hearts racing. "We can't stay here. It's not safe," Jamie insisted, her eyes wide with fear. That sound, it could be him, or maybe it's just the woods settling. Either way, we shouldn't stick around to find out. Her words spurred us back into motion, the uncertainty of our safety pushing us onward. As we left the shack, I glanced back at the jacket, wondering about the hiker who had worn it. Had they encountered the same madman? Were the items a deliberate distraction, or just remnants of another innocent adventure gone wrong? The rest of our descent was marked by silent vigilance. We spoke little, conserving energy, each lost in our thoughts, replaying the day's horrors in our minds. The trees seemed to whisper secrets as we passed, adding to the growing sense of dread that the answers we thought we knew were just more questions in disguise. When we finally saw the outline of the ranger station through the trees, relief washed over us. But even as we approached safety, the mystery of the mountain loomed large, the truth about the stalker obscured by the forest's deepening shadows. Reaching the ranger station felt like emerging from a nightmare into a world that seemed too normal to be real. The ranger on duty looked up in surprise as we burst in, our faces pale and eyes wild with the residue of terror. "What happened out there? You folks look like you've seen a ghost," the ranger said, immediately standing up, his concern evident. We took turns recounting our harrowing experience, each voice layering fear upon confusion. The ranger listened intently, his brow furrowing with every detail we provided about the stalker and the cryptic warnings we had ignored. "I know these mountains like the back of my hand, and I've never heard of anyone living out there, not for years," he said, skepticism tinged with a hint of fear. "But with what you're telling me, we'll have to send a team up to investigate." As we sat in the warmth of the ranger station, waiting for the authorities to arrive, the reality of our ordeal began to settle in. The adrenaline that had fueled our escape faded, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion and a gnawing unease that wouldn't dissipate. Jamie kept replaying the man's crazed expression, trying to understand what could drive a person to such madness. Was he just a hermit? Or something worse? She pondered out loud. What made him choose us? Emily wrapped a blanket tighter around her shoulders, her eyes distant. Maybe it was just our turn. Possibly we were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. But what if we weren't? What if he's still out there because we didn't really escape? What if he let us go? I shuddered at the thought, remembering the map with trails marked in red, the photos of hikers, some marked with an X, the idea that there could be more to the story, that perhaps the stalker wasn't working alone, sent chills down my spine. The ranger returned with cups of hot coffee, his attempt to comfort us somewhat reassuring. Yet, as we sipped bitter brew, the silence between us spoke volumes. Our minds were haunted by the same unspoken question. What if the nightmare wasn't over? As we left the ranger station, the sun setting behind the mountains cast long shadows across the ground, mirroring the dark thoughts lingering in my mind. Walking away, I couldn't shake the feeling that the eyes I felt on us in the woods might still be watching, waiting for our return. We had escaped the mountain, but the fear, the memories, and the shadows followed us back into our lives. Was the summit stalker just a figment of the mountain's isolated madness, or a harbinger of darker secrets hidden within the Adirondacks? And as I lay in bed that night, a final thought haunted me. What if the stalker wasn't the only one out there?
Have you ever felt like the world was trying to tell you something, but you just weren't listening? That's precisely how my trip started. It was supposed to be this cool adventure, just me, my camera, and miles of untouched canyons in Utah. The kind of place where you can actually hear yourself think, you know? I've always loved hiking alone. It gives me time to clear my head. That day, the sun was shining. There was a nice, cool breeze, and everything felt just right. I packed up my stuff, made sure I had plenty of water and snacks, and I hit the trail early. I wanted to catch the canyon in that perfect morning light that photographers go crazy for. As I walked, I remember thinking how quiet it was. Like, unusually quiet. Even the usual sounds, birds, wind rustling through the bushes, seemed muted. It was eerie, but I shrugged it off. I figured it was just me adjusting to being out in nature instead of the noisy city. Halfway through the hike, I stopped to take a picture of the cliffs, and that's when I noticed something weird. There was this narrow path branching off the main trail. It wasn't on my map. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to check it out. That was my first mistake. Hey, this isn't on the map, but it looks well-trodden. Wonder where it leads? I muttered to myself, stepping onto the path as the hairs on the back of my neck started to stand up. Little did I know that path would change everything. As I ventured down the unmarked path, the walls of the canyon began to close in, towering over me like silent giants. The path twisted and turned, weaving its way deeper into the heart of the canyon. With each step, the air grew cooler and the light dimmer, as if the sun itself was hesitant to follow where I was headed. I paused for a moment to catch my breath and drink some water. That's when I first heard it, a soft echo. It was like the sound of footsteps, but when I stopped, they stopped too. I looked around, half expecting to see someone else on the trail, but there was no one. "Hello?" I called out, my voice bouncing off the canyon walls, only to be met with silence. A chill ran down my spine, but I laughed it off. Probably just my own echo, I thought, trying to convince myself more than anything. As I continued, the path seemed to grow narrower, the shadows longer. I tried to focus on the beauty of the place, the way the rock formations changed colors with the depth of the canyon, the sparse, hardy plants clinging to life in such a rugged environment. But the feeling that I wasn't alone kept nagging at me. I reached a spot where the path opened up a bit, and I decided to stop for some photos. That's when I noticed something odd. The echoes were back, but this time, they didn't quite match my movements. I clapped my hands, and a second later I heard it. Another clap, faint but unmistakable, as if someone or something was mimicking me. "Okay, that's weird. Is someone messing with me?" I said out loud, scanning the canyon walls for any sign of life. My heart started to race, but there was still part of me that thought I might just be imagining things. Maybe it was the solitude getting to me. Or perhaps it was the canyon playing tricks with the sound. Trying to shake off the uneasy feeling, I packed up my camera and decided it was time to head back before it got too late. As I turned to leave, a cold breeze swept through the canyon, carrying with it a faint whisper, almost like someone sighing. I froze, listening, but it was gone as quickly as it had come. Laughing at myself for being so jumpy, I started back toward the main trail, my steps quickening with a mix of eagerness to leave and a lingering curiosity about the strange sounds. Little did I know, the real mystery of the canyon was just beginning to unfold. By the time I decided to head back to the main trail, the sun was dipping lower, casting long, eerie shadows across the canyon floor. That's when my phone rang, breaking the silence and nearly making me jump out of my skin. It was my best friend, Sarah, checking in as she promised she would. "Hey, you sound exhausted. Everything okay?" Sarah's voice was a mix of concern and curiosity. "Yeah, just this place is weirder than I thought. I found a trail that wasn't on the map, and there have been some odd echoes and stuff. Probably just the canyon. But it's freaking me out," I admitted, trying to keep my voice light. Sarah was silent for a moment before replying. "You know, those places have all sorts of legends. Maybe you stumbled onto something, I don't know, haunted or whatever. Just be careful, okay?" I laughed, a bit too loudly. "Haunted? Really? You know I don't believe in that stuff. Still, just stay on the paths, you know. Promise me." Her tone was serious, more insistent than usual. "I promise. Heading back to the familiar now. I'll call you once I'm out, I reassured her, though I couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah might be right. Maybe I had ventured too far into something unknown. As we ended the call, I quickened my pace, but the feeling of being watched grew stronger. The earlier echoes had morphed into a constant presence behind me, like footsteps mirroring my own, but softer, almost cautious. I stopped abruptly, and so did the steps. Heart pounding, I turned around swiftly, expecting to catch a glimpse of whoever was following me, but there was nothing, just the quiet, deepening shadows. Enough of this, I muttered to myself, feeling a mix of frustration and fear. I was annoyed at myself for letting the canyon spook me, and irritated that Sarah's words had gotten under my skin. Determined to prove to myself that it was all in my head, I decided to take a few pictures of the shadows. If there's someone there, I'll see them in the photos, I reasoned, trying to use my camera as a tool to confront my fears. But as I looked through the lens, focusing on the places where I felt eyes on me, my hands trembled. The photos showed nothing but the empty path and the natural beauty of the canyon, yet the feeling of unease remained. As the light faded, so did my resolve. The canyon had shifted from a place of majestic beauty to one of oppressive secrecy, and I was no longer sure of my place within it. Each snap of a twig, each rustle of leaves seemed to whisper that I should leave, and this time I was inclined to listen. The light was fading fast, and the canyon seemed to hold its breath as dusk settled like a cloak. I forced myself to move faster, each step an effort to outpace the dread building in my chest. Despite my earlier bravado, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I found myself back near the strange cave I'd discovered earlier. My curiosity, a trait that had always served me well in my photography, flared up against my better judgment. Just a brief look inside, to prove there's nothing here, I told myself. My voice a mere whisper against the silence of the canyon. Inside, the cave was cooler than the air outside, the walls damp and echoing my every move. I flashed my light around, the beam catching on ancient paintings that seemed to watch me from the walls. They depicted figures with elongated limbs and oversized eyes, dancing around what looked like a fire. My heart skipped a beat as I realized the shadows in the paintings looked too much like the ones I'd seen outside. "It's just old art, Lisa. Get a grip," I muttered, taking deep breaths to steady my nerves. I snapped a few photos, the camera's click sounding unnaturally loud in the enclosed space. The flash illuminated the cave in stark relief, and for a moment everything was silent. Then I heard it. A soft, sorrowful moan that seemed to come from the very walls of the cave. I froze, camera poised, as the sound grew into a cacophony of whispers. Panic surged through me, and I nearly dropped my camera. "This isn't happening," I gasped, backing towards the entrance, my eyes darting around, searching for any sign of movement. As I retreated from the cave, the air outside felt thick, heavy with the scent of rain, though the sky was clear. The moon was rising, casting a pale glow over the canyon, giving everything a ghostly, ethereal appearance. I leaned against a rock, trying to calm my racing heart, telling myself it was just echoes, just the wind. "Who's there?" I called out tentatively, hoping for no answer. Silence greeted me, and I laughed weakly at my own paranoia. "See, nothing. You're letting the legends get to you," I reassured myself, though my voice trembled. As I made my way back to the main path, I kept my flashlight trained on the ground in front of me, avoiding the shadows that clung to the edges of my vision. Every rustle of wind, every crackle of dry leaves made me jump, but I pressed on, determined to reach the safety of my campsite. The canyon was both oppressively silent and filled with whispers of the past, a constant push and pull that left me exhausted and on edge. Yet, the further I walked, the more I felt the oppressive weight lifting, replaced by a weary tension. I was almost out, almost safe. Finally, the familiar path under my feet seemed to herald safety. The moon cast a silvery glow that made the landscape look serene, almost forgiving. I was almost out of the canyon, almost free from the unnerving experiences of the day. That's when I saw it, a glimmer of something by the river that ran parallel to the path. Curiosity, mixed with an innate desire to find a rational explanation for everything I'd encountered, nudged me closer. At the river's edge, the water reflected the moonlight, creating a shimmering mirror. But as I approached, I noticed something odd about the reflection. It wasn't just the moon and the canyon walls reflected in the water. There seemed to be another figure standing, just at the edge of my peripheral vision. I whipped around, heart in my throat, expecting to come face to face with whoever had been following me. But there was no one there. Turning back to the river, I focused on the reflection, trying to see the figure again. However, as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone. Had my mind been playing tricks on me? The stress of the day, the legends, the eerie echoes. They must be getting to me, I thought. I took several deep breaths, watching the water calm as my breathing steadied. "That's it, Lisa. You're just tired and stressed," I reassured myself aloud. But then a soft splash from upstream caught my attention. My head snapped up, scanning the darkness. Maybe it was just a fish, or a falling rock. Perfectly natural explanations. Curiosity rekindled. I decided to investigate the source of the splash. As I walked along the riverbank, I found a small, crumpled piece of fabric caught on a branch near the water. It looked like a part of a shirt, and something about it seemed familiar. Could it belong to another hiker? Was someone else out here, lost or hurt? I picked up the fabric, turning it over in my hands. It was just a piece of a plain blue shirt, probably left behind by another hiker, I reasoned. Yet, something inside me couldn't shake off the feeling that it was a clue. Something important. "Hello? Is anyone there? Do you need help?" I called out, hoping for a response, yet dreading it at the same time. Silence filled the air once more, thick and palpable. I pocketed the fabric, deciding to bring it back to the park ranger. Maybe they could make something of it. As I headed back to the path, a sudden gust of wind sent another whisper through the trees, chilling me to the bone. Each step took effort, my mind racing with possibilities, natural and supernatural. Was I being guided by a lost soul, or was I walking into a trap set by something far more sinister? The uncertainty gnawed at me, but I pressed on, driven by a need to leave the canyon and its shadows behind. The final stretch of the path back to my campsite was the longest walk of my life. Every sound made me flinch. Every shadow seemed to move. But I kept going, driven by the desperate need to see the familiar, to be out of the canyon and back in the safety of the open sky. When I finally stumbled into the clearing where I'd pitched my tent, the relief was overwhelming. I collapsed by the fire pit, not bothering to relight the smoldering embers, and allowed myself a moment to just breathe. The stars above were bright, the night air crisp and cool. Everything appeared normal, peaceful even. But as I sat there, trying to reconcile the day's fears with the calm of the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed inside me. The echoes in the canyon, the mysterious figure in the water, the whispers and the fabric. It all swirled in my mind, a maelstrom of fear and doubt. Was it all in my head? Was I just scaring myself? I whispered into the darkness, half hoping for an answer. Pulling the crumpled piece of blue fabric from my pocket, I examined it again under the light of my flashlight. It was just an ordinary piece of cloth, yet it felt heavy with significance. I decided then to leave it outside my tent, a part of me needing to believe it was simply trash, meaningless. I crawled into my tent, exhausted, and eventually drifted into a fitful sleep. Dreams of shadowy figures and echoing footsteps plagued me, blurring the lines between asleep and awake. When morning came, bright and clear, I packed up my camp with a haste born of lingering fear. I was ready to leave the canyon behind, to return to a world where echoes were just echoes, and shadows were only shadows. As I shouldered my backpack, I glanced back at where I'd left the fabric, only to find it gone. In its place, a set of footprints led away from my tent, disappearing into the woods beyond. My heart stopped. Had someone or something been watching me even as I slept? I followed the footprints with my eyes until they vanished, then turned away, a shiver running down my spine. As I walked back to my car, the silence of the canyon was broken by the faintest echo of footsteps. Not mine, following me. Driving away, the roads never felt so long, and the echoes of the canyon lingered in my mind, a haunting refrain. Was I leaving the mystery behind, or was I carrying a piece of it with me? The unanswered questions echoed just like those footsteps, a reminder that some places hold secrets deeper than their shadows. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a chilling thought whispered, echoing the unresolved mysteries of the canyon, will the echoes follow me home?